Hello everyone, this is Reach for the Sky, and I'm back with another vehicle video guide. Today it's the Panzer V Panther. Now once again I'll make clear that this is less about the gameplay of the vehicle and how to play the vehicle, and more about the technicalities, the design features, the history of the vehicle, and the specifications of each variant, so what makes one model different from another. So the Panther was a direct response to the Russian T-34 and KV-1 tanks. The Germans saw that these tanks were serious problems, and when they first invaded Russia they didn't really have anything capable of defeating them with any ease. Their guns weren't up to the job of destroying the tanks, and these tanks were in large numbers, so they needed something efficient and something powerful and something effective to deal with these tanks. And this is where the Panther entered the war. The T-34 was assessed by the Germans because they captured quite a few of them and they scrutinized them very closely. And they noted that the key features were sloping armor, wide tracks to keep the ground pressure low and for good maneuverability, and a powerful gun. So two companies were offered a chance to win a contract to design a new medium tank, MAN and DB, or Daimler-Benz. The MAN design featured torsion bar suspension and a high drive shaft, which meant the hull was quite tall. The Panther is quite a tall tank. And the Daimler-Benz design was much more like the T-34, had a turret towards the front of the tank, rear drive sprocket, and it physically resembled the T-34 much more closely. Initially the Daimler-Benz design was going to be declared the winner, but MAN learnt what their competitors were doing and they took a few liberties by compromising their own design and matching it to the better features of the Daimler-Benz design. So essentially they combined the best elements of their own design and Daimler-Benz's to create a design which ultimately won the contract. The torsion bar suspension wasn't new, but combined with the overlapping road wheels, it created a very smooth ride. The Panther could cross very rough terrain at high speed and it would stay straight and level. It wouldn't bump all over the place. It was still difficult to fire on the move, but it wasn't as impossible as with other tanks. The suspension system was very similar to the Tiger's, the overlapping road wheels as you can see here, and it was a slack track. The overlapping road wheels meant that no return rollers along the top of the track were necessary, so the track sort of it was slack. It wasn't held up by rollers, so the rollers weren't necessary because of these self-sufficient road wheels. The Panther was quickly put into production after an initial prototype was built. September 1942 was when the initial version, the D, was put into production. This is the D here. But a lack of machine tools to produce the vehicles with, and extremely heavy Allied bombing, slowed the production. And the fact that the production was so rushed created some oversights and flaws. The engine compartment, for example, was made watertight to make the crossing of waterways possible. But this created some quite serious overheating issues. And also the fuel pipes, which carried fuel from the tanks to the engine, weren't insulated, which meant that fumes leaked into the engine compartment and that created fires. That's why a lot of the early Panthers burst into flames. But despite some of these early problems, these were later rectified, and the Panther was possibly the most advanced tank of the war. It had the triangle, it was called, firepower, mobility and protection, and it had a very large influence on post-war tank design. So first of all, the initial variant, the Panzer V Panther Alfred D. This is the first version of the Panther mass-produced and the first version in War Thunder. Tier 3, battle rating 5.0. It was built from January to September 1943. It mounted the Kampfwagen Kanon 42L70 75mm. This had a very high muzzle velocity, in part because of the long barrel and the large propellant charge, which gave it penetration even greater than that of the Tiger I's 88mm L56. The muzzle velocity was roughly 960 meters a second with armor piercing. Some sources cite it lower, 935. Some say it was around 990, so I've gone for the middle. Ammunition was stored horizontally in the sponsons, which is this upper hull area here, above the tracks, and vertically in the whole side. The hull MG was placed in a so-called letterbox vertical flap here when it was in use. When it wasn't in use, it was closed. The D in game is a late model known as the D2. You can tell this because it has the shirts and skirts here. Unlike earlier skirts on the Panzer IV, for example, which were only 5mm stick, these are actually 10mm stick. And the D2 also had a HL230 engine, which develops 700 horsepower. Next up is the A, battle rating of 5.3 and a rise to tier 4. Now a point to notice is in-game the D doesn't have access to APCR, but the A and the G do. So the A entered production in July 1943, and production ended in May 1944. It had a new cupola, which was semi-hemispherical. It was a sort of half-sphere shape. Higher viewing ports, so they could see a further distance. And the new hull-mounted ball mount for the MG, which was standard issue for many tanks, but the Panther didn't have it until the A. The turret front on the D was previously only 80mm. This area, the manlet is the curved area. The turret front is actually this flat bit here. So the turret front was increased to 110 from 80 on the A. And the mantlet, same as the D, is 120mm. That's the main differences between the A and the D. And finally is the G, also tier 4, battle rating 5.7. This variant included a chin mantlet, as you can see here. The traditional, completely elliptical, semi-elliptical curve has been changed, and a chin juts out at the bottom, which eliminates the shot trap that the earlier versions had. Because the mantlet used to curve down, if a shot entered and hit this part of the mantlet, it would bounce down into the roof of the hull, which was not very well protected, and it would enter the tank and do some serious damage. The G also had an increase in upper hull side armour here along the sponsons. This was 40 previously, but on the G it's 50mm. The turret front here, the flat area, was reduced to 100mm from 110, but it was angled further back, so 2 degrees of extra angling, so slightly less thick, but not much of a difference. It saved weight. There were lots of internal changes on the G. The final drive had given a lot of issues to Panther drivers, but with the G that was mostly rectified, and gear changes were a lot smoother. The top speed could be reached without too much difficulty. Now these next two tanks, the F and the 2, never saw combat, or there isn't any definitive proof to show that they entered combat. The F was designed to be an upgrade of the Panther design, and most of the changes were focused around the turret. This tank utilized the experimental Schmal term, which translates into narrow turret. It was a smaller target, and it saved weight, and is also quite well protected. The turret front is angled slightly and is 120mm thick. The sides and rear are 60mm thick, and the mantlet, as you can see, is bell-shaped, much like the Tiger II's, which covered the area directly around the gun. Finally, the Panther II, battle rating 7.7. Now these large scopes and lights at the top here, that's the infrared night vision, which allowed the driver, the gunner, to see in the dark. That's the one for the driver there, and there's the gunners. So the Panther II was designed to be a full-scale replacement of the Panther, and funnily enough, This was designed before the original Panther went into production, so Hitler had plans for a replacement even before the Panther saw combat, but the Panther II was far less suitable for mass production, which is why it never came to fruition. And Hitler also wanted to standardize the Panther II and the King Tiger. He wanted them to be interchangeable to simplify production. The Tiger II and the Panther II would have shared the same transmission, the same all-steel road wheels, and the same running gear. The upper glacis was increased to 100mm. The hull side was raised to 60mm. The hull roof was raised to 30mm, and the tank was designed to be fitted with the KWK-43L71 88mm, the same gun that the production models of the King Tiger used. Now, while we're on the subject of the Panther, I'll cover the Jagdpanther. This is a tank destroyer based on the Panzer G chassis, mounting the KWK-43L71, which is the same as the King Tiger's gun, but it's just designated Kampfwagenkanone or anti-tank gun because it's mounted on a tank destroyer. Now, the Jagdpanther we have in game is a later model, G2 as it was known, with a simplified mantlet bolted on from the outside. You can see the bolts, and the single driver viewport. The G1 had twin ports for the driver. It was an ideal base for a tank destroyer, the Panther chassis, because it was fast, it was well protected, and it was a stable firing platform. The large crew compartment made operation of the vehicle easier, especially loading of the gun. It gave it an impressive rate of fire. See here, 13 seconds reload, and 14.4 for both of the King Tigers. The premium version we have in game is the Befehlswagen, Panzer Befehlswagen, which translates into Armoured Command Vehicle. This had extra radios, you can see from the twin aerials here, extra radios to communicate with the units that the command tank was leading, as well as headquarters to report on the progress of the unit. So, that's the Panther in War Thunder. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you very much. This has been Reach for the Sky. See you soon.